With Radio Algeria International, you will not miss a single major political or economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf has officially launched the candidacy of Ambassador Salma Malika Haddadi for the post of Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission. And the Security Council's 8-3+ group has called on Libyans to work together to remove the remaining obstacles to the holding of elections. And air strikes have been launched by the Israeli occupation against Syria's western coast, causing considerable damage. And those were the major developments. Now, the full news edition. Good afternoon. The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has insisted on the need to find urgent solutions to preserve the architectural and historical identity of the old city of Al-Kasbah, or the Kasbah of Algiers, and of other Algerian architectural sites. The details with Jamal Salmani.
After attending a presentation on the strategic vision for the development and modernization of Algiers at the Mufti Zakaria Culture Palace, the President gave instructions and guidelines to several ministers and officials regarding the projects and the action plan for the development and modernization of the capital. President Tebboune said the Kasbah represents the soul of the country's capital, and its monuments belong to all Algerians. He said, the houses of the Kasbah have deteriorated and no solution has been found since the 1970s, as stressing that the solution lies in the intervention of the state for the acquisition of buildings belonging to individuals in the old city and their incorporation into the national domain in order to restore and rehabilitate them to accommodate cultural, artistic, tourist, and craft activities. The President also cited different other sites in Algiers that need rehabilitation, notably Riyad al-Fath, so that it offers services that meet the expectations of families who visit the site regularly. Regarding the project to build an aquarium in Algiers, the President gave instructions for building the largest one in the Mediterranean region, paying particular attention to its exploitation for tourist purposes through the organization of trips for children and students. The President of the Republic stressed the importance of implementing these projects to guarantee a pleasant living environment for the inhabitants of Algiers, with modern facilities and infrastructure worthy of the world's major capitals.
The President of the Republic then visited an exhibition highlighting the various projects planned as part of the modernization strategy and related plans, with the aim of making of Algiers a center of Arab, Muslim, African and Mediterranean influence. This strategy includes a white plan for urban development and building rehabilitation, a yellow plan for transport and mobility in the capital, a green plan aimed at restoring ecological balances and improving the environment in the capital, and a blue plan to reconnect the city of Algiers to the sea. President Abdelmadjid Tebboune said after Algiers, this state will start rehabilitation projects in other cities like Constantine and other parts of the country, given that innovation and modernization potential exists in Algeria.
لما نكمل بالعاصمة نفوت الولايات الأخرى. قسنطينة لازم تأخذ حقها كذلك. قسنطينة بلاد تفوق 1200 سنة، يعني بلاد تاع مقاومة وبلاد تاع تاريخ بالنسبة للولايات الأخرين، شرق غرب وسط جنوب كذلك. يعني بهالكيفية نرجع الجمال للرأس اللي هي العاصمة، المدن الأخرى كذلك، والجزائر بصفة عامة. اليوم الأمور يعني ميسورة الحمد لله. On peut avoir l'ambition de la rénovation, il faut le faire.
That was a statement of the President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, after attending a presentation on the strategic vision for the development and modernization of Algiers at the Mufti Zakaria Cultural Palace. The Minister of State for Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad and African Affairs, Mr. Ahmed Attaf, has officially launched the campaign of the candidacy of Ambassador Salma Malika Haddadi for the post of Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission in Addis Ababa on the sidelines of his official visit to Ethiopia as special envoy of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune. Speaking at the ceremony organized on the occasion by the Algerian Embassy in Addis Ababa in the presence of members of the diplomatic corps accredited to the AU and senior officials of the Continental Organization, Mr. Attaf said that the candidacy of Ambassador Haddadi for the elections scheduled for next February shows the special attention given by President Tebboune to Algeria's contribution to strengthening joint African action with a view to achieving the objectives of peace, stability and development on the continent. Mr. Attaf stressed Algeria's will to serve the African Union.
Algeria's candidature comes out of a strong determination to serve our Union, to serve it diligently, to serve it tirelessly, and to serve it faithfully. Algeria's candidature comes out of strong belief that it is timely and that it is adapted to the new continental environment with its challenges and promises. And finally, Algeria's candidature comes out of a deep inner sense of an African duty that we are keen to fulfill with all African men and women of commitment, faith, loyalty, and goodwill.
The meeting was an opportunity for Ambassador Salma Malika Haddadi to present to the representatives of the member states of the Continental Organization the main thrusts of her program and the various elements of her ambitious vision for the future of the financial and administrative management of the AU Commission in accordance with the most effective management standards based on her rich diplomatic experience and her in-depth knowledge of African affairs. Earlier, the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Ahmed Attaf, held talks in Addis Ababa with his Ethiopian counterpart as part of his official visit to Ethiopia in his capacity as Special Envoy of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune. The two ministers discussed ways and means of taking advantage of the forthcoming meeting of the Grand Joint Committee to give a new impetus to the Algerian-Ethiopian relations, notably by updating and enriching the bilateral legal framework and by paying due attention to promoting cooperation in the economic field. The two ministers also exchanged views on important issues raised at the African Union. The 8th Arab Housing Congress has kicked off at the International Conference Center here in Algiers under the high patronage of the President of the Republic to debate for 3 days the theme of sustainable urban planning and construction challenges and hopes. Held on the sidelines of the 41st session of the Council of Arab Ministers of Housing and Urban Planning, the Congress aims to examine the role of governments and the sectors concerned by improving housing and urban planning policies. It will also focus on technological developments in construction and sustainable urban development while assessing the implementation of the urban agenda linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly Goal 11, through integrated planning of cities, villages and buildings. You still listen to Radio Algeria International, and a delegation from the Council of the Nation led by its speaker, Mr. Salah Koujil, took part in the 19th United Nations Internet Governance Forum and the parliamentary process held in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, under the theme Building Our Multi-Stakeholder Digital Future. The parliamentary process aims to define a strategic approach that encompasses an understanding of new trends and the adoption of technologies while mitigating the risks induced by rapid change. The Security Council's A3+ group, including Algeria, Mozambique, Sierra Leone and Guyana, has called on the Libyans to work together more closely to remove the remaining obstacles to the holding of national elections. The details in this report by Jamal Salmani.
On behalf of the group, Algiers' permanent representative to the United Nations, Ammar Ben Jama, said that the A3+ group reiterated the importance of focusing on resolving the outstanding issues relating to the electoral process with a view to eliminating the main obstacles to the holding of national elections. The group also held the preparation for the new electoral process for a further 59 municipalities, as well as the appointment of a board of directors for the Central Bank of Libya.
Our group urges the relevant authorities to support the newly elected municipal leader as they work towards delivering services to the Libyan people. We welcome the announcement of the High National Election Commission regarding the start of the electoral process for a new list of 59 municipalities next January. This step is vital for strengthening democracy and empowering citizens to shape the future of Libya. The A3 Plus welcomes and fully supports the appointment of the Board of Directors for the Central Bank of Libya.
The A3 Plus group urged the Libyan actors and institutions to refrain from any action that could undermine these positive steps, to reverse unilateral measures that fuel tensions, and to give priority to dialogue and cooperation without preconditions and in a spirit of compromise.
All of the United Nations remain crucial in facilitating a Libyan-led national dialogue among key stakeholders. This dialogue is a necessary starting point for resolving outstanding issues, conducting successful national elections, and unifying Libyan institutions. Reaching consensus on these critical issues is essential for the success of Libya's election, Libya's national election. The A3 Plus welcomes UN's meal proposal to revitalize Libya's political process, to foster trust among key stakeholders, and pave the way for national elections while preserving stability on the ground.
The A3 Plus said that the humanitarian situation in Libya, in particular the massive movement of migrants and refugees from unstable regions, highlighted the urgent need for streamlined humanitarian aid and coordinated efforts by the Libyan institutions, assuring that international cooperation is crucial to guarantee the safety, dignity, and human rights of these people.
You're still listening to Radio Aljazeera International and to the Middle East now. The World Food Programme has once again called for an access of humanitarian aid into Gaza, where it stressed that 2 million people are confronted to famine. In a message posted on social networks, the organization's executive director affirmed that the town of Gaza was the most affected area of the enclave, as only few lorries are allowed to enter the territory. New airstrikes have been launched by the Israeli occupation against Syria's western coast, causing considerable damage.
According to media, the Israeli attack, considered the most violent since 2012, hit several military sites and installations in the western coastal region of Tartus. Several news agencies affirmed that several houses were damaged by the attack, estimating at 473 the number of airstrikes launched for the past week by the Israeli army against Syria. This came as Germany today urged the Israeli government to renounce its Jewish settlement extension plan in the occupied Golan Heights. Addressing a press conference, a spokesman for the Foreign Ministry stated that the move ran counter international law, which considered the Golan annexed by Israel in 1981 part and parcel of the Syrian territory. A similar call was made by several countries, and organizations have condemned the decision endorsed yesterday by the Israeli government. They denounced Israel's decision to extend its settlement policy to the occupied Syrian Golan as a blatant violation of international law and UN resolutions. It is worth recalling that a resolution was recently adopted by the UN General Assembly calling on Israel to abide by Resolution 497 and cancel its decision to impose its administration to the occupied Golan.
Meanwhile, the head of the UN Coordination Office for Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, Tom Fletcher, today said that Syria was in need of massive flow of aid, considering the situation extremely dramatic. Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger will officially withdraw their membership of the Economic Community of West African State, ECOWAS, as from January 29, 2025. Here are the details.
Speaking at the end of the 66th Ordinary Session of the Conference of Heads of State and Government of ECOWAS, held in Abuja, Nigeria, the President of the ECOWAS Commission, Omar Aliou Touré, said that the conference had taken note of the notification of the Republic of Burkina Faso, the Republic of Mali and the Republic of Niger of their decision to withdraw from ECOWAS. ECOWAS has set a transition period of 6 months to determine the modalities for the withdrawal of these three countries concerned and to continue mediation with the hope of bringing them back into the regional organization. An extraordinary summit of ECOWAS will be held at the end of the transitional period to adopt the modalities for the withdrawal of the three Sahelian countries. In January 2024, Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger announced their immediate withdrawal from ECOWAS, accusing the community of no longer meeting the aspirations of their peoples.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. That's it for our news bulletin. I invite you now to listen to our health magazine, compiled and presented by Mohammed Khatel.
And welcome to a new edition of your weekly program, The Health Magazine. Today's program will focus on World AIDS Day, which coincides with the 1st of December every year. World AIDS Day takes place on the 1st of December each year. It's an opportunity for people worldwide to unite in the fight against HIV, to show support for people living with HIV, and to commemorate those who have died from an AIDS-related illness. Founded in 1988, World AIDS Day was the first ever global health day. Over 100,000 people are living with HIV in the UK. Globally, there are an estimated 36.7 million people who have the virus. Despite the virus only being identified in 1984, more than 35 million people have died of HIV or AIDS, making it one of the most destructive pandemics in history. Today, scientific advances have been made in HIV treatment. There are laws to protect people living with HIV, and we understand so much more about the condition. Despite this, each year in the UK, around 6,000 people are diagnosed with HIV. People do not know the facts about how to protect themselves and others, and stigma and discrimination remain a reality for many people living with the condition. HIV continues to be a major global public health issue. In 2016, an estimated 36.7 million people were living with HIV, including 1.8 million children, with a global HIV prevalence of 0.8% among adults. Around 30% of these same people do not know that they have the virus. Since the start of the epidemic, an estimated 78 million people have become infected with HIV and 35 million people have died of AIDS-related illnesses. In 2016, 1 million people died of AIDS-related illness. The vast majority of people living with HIV are located in low and middle income countries, with an estimated 25.5 million living in sub-Saharan Africa. Among this group, 19.4 million are living in East and Southern Africa, which saw 44% of new HIV infections globally in 2016. In 2016, there were roughly 1.8 million new HIV infections, a decline from 2.1 million new infections in 2015. There has previously been concern that the annual number of new infections among adults would remain static, as incidence rates failed to shift between 2010 and 2015. However, a slightly more positive trend is emerging, as new infections among adults are now estimated to have declined by 11% and 16% for the general population between 2010 and 2016, whereas there was only an 8% decline between 2010 and 2015. While new HIV infections among children globally have halved, more than 300,000 in 2010 to 160,000 in 2016, which represent 47%, reports indicate that there is much more that needs to be done to improve knowledge of HIV and HIV testing among adolescents and young adults. Young women are especially at risk, with 59% of new infections among young people aged between 15 and 24 occurring among this group. Moreover, despite the progress made across the 69 countries which witnessed a decline in new infections, UNAIDS warned that progress in combating viral transmission is still not happening fast enough to meet global targets. A closer comparison of country data shows huge discrepancies in efforts to slow the spread of new infections. Some countries have achieved a decline of 50% or more in new HIV infections among adults over the last 10 years, while many have made no measurable progress. Yet some countries are still experiencing worrying increases in new HIV infections. Since 2010, the annual number of new infections in the Eastern Europe and Central Asia region, for example, has climbed by an alarming 60%. Despite challenges, new global efforts have meant that the number of people receiving HIV treatment has increased dramatically in recent years, particularly in resource-poor countries. A major milestone was achieved in 2016, where for the first time it was found that more than half of all people living with HIV, which represent 53%, now have access to life-saving treatment. In 2016, 19.5 million people living with HIV were receiving antiretroviral treatment, up from 17 million in June 2016 and 7.5 million in 2010. If this level of treatment scale-up continues, it is estimated that the world will meet its global target of 30 million people on treatment by 2020. In 2016, Algeria registered more than 1,000 new HIV infections and over 200 AIDS-related deaths. There were some 13,000 people living with HIV in 2016, among whom an average of 76% were accessing antiretroviral therapy. Among pregnant women living with HIV, and an average of 49% were accessing treatment of prophylaxis to prevent transmission of HIV to their children. An estimated 100 children were newly infected with HIV due to mother-to-child transmission. Among people living with HIV, approximately 55% had suppressed viral loads. The key populations most affected by HIV in Algeria are the people who engage in unprotected sexual relationships and people who inject drugs. Since 2010, new HIV infections have decreased by 37% and AIDS-related deaths have increased by 7%. Algeria has recently introduced HIV testing at all healthcare facilities, which has enabled the country to make important progress towards the first 90 of the 1990 targets. Given the dynamics of the epidemic, there is a need to focus the national AIDS response in combination prevention, including scaling up of innovative testing approaches for key populations. There is also a need to strengthen community stakeholders in order to mobilize funding and conduct fundraising activities and to promote political advocacy and dialogue on stigma and discrimination at the community and governmental levels. World AIDS Day is important because it reminds the public and government that HIV has not gone away. There is still a vital need to raise money, increase awareness, fight prejudice, and improve education. World AIDS Day is an opportunity to show solidarity with the millions of people living with HIV worldwide. Most people do this by wearing an HIV awareness red ribbon on the day. With this, we come to the end of this edition of the Health Magazine for this week. We'll meet you next week with another subject. Thank you.
The Kasbah is a unique kind of Medina or Islamic city. It stands in one of the finest coastal sites on the Mediterranean, overlooking the islands, where a Carthaginian trading post was established in the 4th century before Christ. There are the remains of the citadel, old mosques and Ottoman-style palaces, as well as the remains of a traditional urban structure associated with a deep-rooted sense of community. The Kasbah of Algiers is an outstanding example of a historic Maghreb city having had extensive influence on town planning in the western part of the Mediterranean and sub-Saharan Africa. Indeed, located on the Mediterranean coast, the site was inhabited at least from the 6th century BC, when a Phoenician trading post was established in there. The term Kasbah, that originally designated the highest point of the Medina during the Zirid area, today applies to the ensemble of the old town of El Jazeera, within the boundaries marked by the ramparts and built at the end of the 16th century, dating back to the Ottoman period. In this living environment where nearly 50,000 people reside, very interesting traditional houses, palaces, hammams, mosques, and various souks are still conserved, the urban form of which bears witness of an effect of stratification of several styles in a complex and original system that has adapted remarkably well to a very hilly and uneven side. The Casbah of Algiers has exercised considerable influence on architecture and town planning in North Africa, Andalusia, and in sub-Saharan Africa during the 16th and 17th century. These exchanges are illustrated in the specific character of its houses and the density of its urban stratification, a model of human settlement where the ancestral lifestyle and Muslim customs have blended with other types of traditions. The Casbah of Algiers is an outstanding example of a traditional human settlement representing a profoundly Mediterranean Muslim culture, synthesis of numerous traditions. The vestige of the citadel, ancient mosques, Ottoman palaces, as well as a traditional urban structure associated with a strong sense of community testify to this culture and are the result of its interaction with the various layers of populations. Despite the changes and the earthquake risks experienced by the site, the Casbah of Algiers still retains its integrity. On the whole, the aesthetic character, material used, and the architectural elements retain their original aspect that expresses the values for which the site was inscribed on the World Heritage List in 1992. The continuing residential function has strengthened the viability of the site as well as the integrity of its image. Restoration work of the built heritage of the Casbah undertaken in the framework of the Safeguarding and Valorization Plan is in conformity with the local and national standards and contributes towards maintaining the integrity of the site. Nevertheless, there are threats to the integrity linked to densification and uncontrolled interventions. Other risks originate from earthquakes and fire, as well as landslides and floods. The attributes of the outstanding universal value for which the site was inscribed are maintained. The Casbah bears witness to a remarkable authenticity as regards the form and conception with its very dense urban planning. Construction materials with earthen bricks, earthen and lime rendering, stone and wood, and also the use, whether residential for trading or cult and popular customs. The survival of traditional architectural skills, notably in the building trades and architectural decoration, is a major advantage in support of the outstanding universal value. The Casbah of Algiers was listed as a National Historic Site in November 1991 and safeguarded sector in 2003. The State Party considers, however, that it is necessary to revise the legal and administrative provisions relating to the property to improve its protection and enhancement. The management of the site is entrusted to the Cultural Directorate of the Wilaya or Province of Algiers. There is a continual need to conserve and rehabilitate the property to forestall deterioration